Okay guys, it was urgent for me to get this video out to you today, so please share this with everybody you know. There's some serious, scary, tyrannical stuff coming down the pike, and if we don't stay on our toes, they'll have us drowning in a sea of oppression before we know it. Wild-eyed statist Cory Booker has come up with S-2449, the ultimate federal infringement and registration bill. That's what they should call it anyway, if they were honest. It's officially titled the Federal Firearms Licensing Act. Remember, a license is the government's way of taking your rights away from you, only to have you buy it back from them with restrictions, of course. Let's get into this bill. License for the acquisition or receipt of firearms. It shall be unlawful for any individual to purchase or receive a firearm unless the individual has a valid federal firearm license. Guys, you'll be criminalized if your dad gives you a gun. You'll be criminalized if you try to buy a gun from your neighbor, and your neighbor will be criminalized for selling you that gun. So you can't just go out and buy, you can't just go out and sell, you can't just transfer any firearm to anybody for any reason without begging the government for permission, ever. Right off the bat, the guy who wrote this should be jailed, and that's no lie. Establishment of federal license to purchase or receive firearms. The Attorney General shall establish a federal system for issuing a federal firearm license to eligible individuals for firearms transferred to such an individual. Requirements. It shall be required that an individual shall be eligible to receive such a license if the individual has completed training in firearms safety, including a written test to demonstrate knowledge of applicable firearms laws. So you got to be aware of other infringements of your rights as you're applying for permission to exercise your rights. How lovely. Hands-on testing, including firing testing, to demonstrate safe use and sufficient accuracy of the firearm. As part of the process for applying for such a license, you have to submit to a background investigation and criminal history check of the individual. Has submitted proof of identity, has submitted the fingerprints of the individual, and has submitted identifying information on the firearm that the person intends to obtain, including make, model, and serial number, and the identity of the firearm seller or transferor. Now listen to this. The Attorney General shall issue or deny a license under this section not later than 30 days after the date on which the application for such license is received. Each license issued under this section shall be valid for the purchase of a single firearm, which shall be purchased not later than 30 days after the date on which the license is issued. One license, one firearm. That's it. And wait till we proceed further, because obtaining multiple licenses for other firearms actually puts you in the doghouse from the federal perspective. A license issued under the system shall expire on the date that is 5 years after the date on which the license was issued. And guys, after that license expires, you don't legally own that firearm anymore. They can literally take it from you because they know it's going to be expired, so you can expect a knock at the door and somebody with their hand held out to confiscate that firearm. This is freaking insane. And the reason I'm doing this video is because most people aren't going to read all of this law. It's very short, so I want to go through all of it, almost all of it anyway. The Attorney General shall provide notice of an application for a license under this section to the relevant state and local officials. So your state and local officials will be notified that you have a firearm, as well as all the information about that firearm. Let me just be clear about something here. This is a national firearms registry, and we all know historically, without fail, registration always leads to confiscation. This is going to set us on the razor blade of tyranny. Background investigation. In general, before issuing a license under this section, the Attorney General shall conduct a background investigation on the applicant and deny any license if receipt of a firearm would violate any provision of state law. Talk about jumping through hoops and loops. poses a danger of bodily injury. Information from state and local officials. After receiving the notice described in paragraph 2F, relevant state and local officials may submit to the Attorney General information demonstrating that the individual possesses a significant danger of bodily injury to self or others by possessing, purchasing, or receiving a firearm. The Attorney General may deny a license under this section if the Attorney General determines that the applicant poses a significant danger of bodily injury to self or others by possessing, purchasing, or receiving a firearm after examining factors the Attorney General considers are relevant to the determination, including, get this, history of threats or acts of violence towards self or others. If you guys got into any fights when you were younger, you're out. No firearms for you. History of use, attempted use, or threatened use of physical force by the applicant against another person. Basically, if there's any spot on your record, you won't be allowed to own a personal protection device. That's what this is saying. Whether the applicant is the subject of or has violated a domestic violence or stalking restraining order or protection order. Okay, here we go. Any prior arrest, pending charge, just a charge, not a conviction, or conviction for a violent or serious crime or disorderly persons offense, stalking offense, or domestic violence offense. Guys, you could have been playing your music too loud at a party, gotten a citation, and you'd be disqualified. Any prior arrest, pending charge, or conviction or offense involving cruelty to animals. So the question is, who's going to define animal cruelty? History of drug or alcohol abuse or involvement in drug trafficking. And who's going to define alcohol or drug abuse? Any recent, get this, any recent acquisition of firearms, ammunition, or other deadly weapons. Think about this. If you legally went through this application process to get a federal firearms license, you're out. If you recently bought ammunition, you're out. You can't get another one. Basically, you can only have one license and therefore one protection device. And if you bought ammo for it beforehand, well, you can't even have that device. Involvement in firearms trafficking or unlawful firearms transfers. Eric Holder and the Fast and Furious crew under Obama wouldn't be able to get a firearm either. Matter of fact, most of what we already read disqualifies most people who are now in law enforcement. History of unsafe storage or handling of firearms. If according to their determination you stored a gun in the wrong place and you were cited for it, you're out of luck. Judicial review. An applicant denied a license under subclause I may file an action in the appropriate district court of the United States for seeking review of the denial. Great, now you got to get tied up in court and pay the fees to beg for your right that should have never been infringed in the first place. This says the Attorney General shall revoke a license issued under this section if the Attorney General determines that the licensee poses a significant danger of bodily injury to self or others by possessing, purchasing, or receiving a firearm. And who's going to determine that? So they're going to keep an eye on you guys. If something comes up in the system that they don't like, boom, knock on the door to confiscate your own private property. Well, if you apply for this and you get this license, it's not your private property anymore. After a regular background investigation conducted by the Attorney General, the possession of a firearm would violate subsection G or N of section 922 or any provision of state law. You know, that's why I love the simplicity of the Second Amendment. Shall not be infringed. You don't need mountains and mountains and pages of laws. This is ridiculous. There's a notice and opportunity for hearing, but I wanted to come down to this thing right here. Enrollment in RAP back. Have you ever heard of RAP back? The Attorney General shall enroll each individual who is issued a license under this section. That's everybody, guys. Everybody who gets this license gets enrolled in the RAP back service. So what's the RAP back service? It basically erases every last shred of anonymity you may have still had up to the point of obtaining this federal firearms license. FBI.gov says a RAP back or hit notice program will inform an employer or other designated entity when an individual who has undergone a fingerprint-based background check and whose fingerprints are retained by a criminal history repository after the check is subsequently arrested. This is your big brother keeping an eye on your activities. If you violate the licensing agreement, your license to have a personal protection device is revoked, and you are automatically declared a criminal if you're still in possession of that firearm. This is downright evil. And the last thing I want to cover is this part on record keeping. It shall be unlawful for any individual to sell or otherwise dispose of a firearm to a person unless the individual reports the transaction to the Attorney General not later than 3 business days after the date on which the firearm is sold or transferred, which shall include identifying information on the firearm seller and on the firearm transferee, including the make, model, and serial number. And if you don't do this, you're automatically declared by the feds a criminal. Guys, I'm going to leave this there. I want to hear what you guys think about this. Please share this video with everybody you know. Cory Booker's S2449 is pure evil. It's a registration which will precede confiscation. I'll see you guys in the next heavily censored shadow ban video.